The market was loud, full of noise and cruel laughter. The air smelled of sweat, dirt, and fear. Slaves stood on wooden blocks, each waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Some were young, some old, but all carried the same hopeless eyes. At the far corner, under the broken light, stood a girl no one wanted. Her skin was pale with bruises. Her lips were cracked and her teeth were broken. She wore torn clothes that barely covered her body. She looked weak, almost ready to collapse. A small wooden sign hung from her neck. Written in rough alien letters, it read, "Price, $2. The crowd roared with laughter when they saw her. $2, one alien shouted. That's too much for garbage. Another pointed at her broken smile and mocked. Maybe she can clean toilets if she doesn't die first. Their words cut like knives. But the girl didn't cry. She only lowered her head, as if she had heard it all before. The auctioneer, a fat alien with greedy eyes, tried to call attention. He shouted, "Who will take this one?" Only $2. $2 for a worker. $2 for a slave. But no one raised a hand. No one even bothered to look. The girl's hands trembled as she held the chain tied to her wrists. She remembered the pain from her last master. The beatings, the hunger, the nights chained in the cold. She thought maybe this was the end. Maybe no one would buy her, and she would be left to rot in the corner until she died. In her chest, she prayed silently for death, because death seemed kinder than this humiliation. Suddenly, a shadow moved near the edge of the crowd. It was not another alien, it was a man, a human. He wore an old coat and carried tired eyes. His hair was messy, his face rough, but there was something different about him. He did not laugh, he did not mock, he only watched quietly. The alien crowd noticed him and began to whisper. "A human? Here?" one said. Another chuckled. "Maybe he's lost. Maybe he thinks slaves are toys." The auctioneer saw the human and quickly smiled, thinking maybe he could finally sell the worthless girl. The human's eyes stayed fixed on the girl. For a moment, the noise of the market faded. He saw not a slave, not trash, but a broken soul standing under the flickering light. Something in her eyes reminded him of his own loneliness, his own nights spent alone. The auctioneer slammed his cane on the stage. $2. Who will give $2? Still, the crowd stayed silent. Some aliens laughed louder. "No one wants her. She is worth less than dirt." The auctioneer's face turned red with anger. He was about to drag the girl away when a calm voice cut through the noise. "I'll take her," the human said. The laughter stopped. The crowd turned, staring in shock. "What?" One alien shouted. "He's serious!" Another gasped. The auctioneer blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. You want this one?" he asked, pointing at the girl as if she were nothing more than a broken object. The human nodded. "Yes, her." The crowd burst into noise again. Some laughed, some cursed, others shook their heads. "What kind of fool spends money on trash?" One alien mocked. Another whispered, "Humans are strange. Maybe he pities her." The girl slowly lifted her head, her eyes filled with pain and disbelief, looked at the human for the first time. She thought maybe he was joking. Maybe this was another cruel trick. But his gaze did not move away. It was steady, quiet, and strange. The auctioneer licked his lips and slammed the cane again. "Sold." For $2 to the human. The sound echoed through the market. The girl felt her knees weaken. She had been sold again, but this time to someone different, someone she could not understand. The human stepped forward and dropped 2 small coins into the auctioneer's hand. The crowd kept whispering, watching closely. The girl's chains were unlocked. The cold metal fell from her wrists, leaving red marks on her skin for the first time. She felt the air on her bare hands, but she didn't move. She stayed still, afraid. Her body shook. Her mind told her this man would hurt her too, just like the others. Yet something deep inside whispered a question. Why did he choose her, when no one else wanted to? The human looked at her and said nothing. He simply gestured for her to follow. His face was unreadable, his eyes tired. But there was no cruelty in them. The crowd laughed again, mocking the human as he walked away with the broken girl. Look at the fool. Look at his $2 prize. But the human ignored them. His steps were slow, steady, as if he carried a heavy weight no one else could see, and the girl, beaten and broken, followed quietly behind him. Chains gone, but fear still clinging to her heart. She did not know what waited for her. She only knew one thing: this was not the end. This was the beginning of something strange, something dangerous, something she could not yet name. The road outside the market was quieter, but the girl could still hear the cruel laughter echoing in her mind. She walked behind the human, her bare feet hurting on the rough stones. The chain marks on her wrists burned with every step. For years she had been passed around like an object. But this was the first time someone bought her with no hesitation. The human did not speak as he walked. His coat was old and dusty, his boots worn. He looked like a man who had traveled too far and carried too much weight. The girl studied him carefully, waiting for the moment when he would turn on her, waiting for the punishment. But he only kept walking, silent as if lost in his own world. They reached a small transport, an old vehicle with scratches and dents. The human opened the door and motioned for her to climb inside. She hesitated, her body frozen. She had learned long ago that traps often came after kindness. But his eyes met hers again, calm, patient, without anger. Slowly she climbed in, curling into the corner like a wounded animal. The human sat in the driver's seat and started the engine. The vehicle moved slowly through the alien city. Lights flickered above them. Shadows moved across broken walls. The girl hugged her knees to her chest. She whispered to herself in a language no one cared to understand, a prayer to survive one more day. The human finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "You don't need to be afraid here." The words startled her. She looked at him, confused. No master had ever said such a thing. Masters gave orders, masters gave pain. But never comfort. She shook her head quickly. I do what you want, I work, I don't need food. Please don't hurt me." Her voice cracked, the broken teeth making her words sharp and painful. The human gripped the steering wheel tighter. His jaw clenched. He hated hearing those words. Hated that she expected nothing but cruelty. "You're not a thing," he said firmly. His tone was final, not like a master, more like a man speaking to himself. Silence filled the transport again. The girl lowered her eyes, unable to believe him. She thought he was lying. She thought maybe he was trying to play a trick. All her life had taught her that kindness was a mask for pain. Still, something in his voice felt strange. It carried truth when they reached his home. It was not what she expected. It was not a palace, not a fortress, just a small, quiet house at the edge of the city. The walls were plain, the windows dusty. It looked lonely, like him. He opened the door and stepped aside, waiting for her to enter first. No master had ever done that before. She hesitated, then slowly walked in. Her eyes scanned the place. There were books on the table, an old lamp, a chair with scratches, and a shelf with a few pictures of people she did not know. The human closed the door behind them. The sound made her flinch. She moved back to the wall, breathing fast. He noticed and raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "You're safe here," he said again. But the words only made her more nervous. He went into the kitchen and returned with bread and a cup of water. He placed them on the table in front of her. "Eat," he said simply. She stared at the food but did not move. Her stomach ached with hunger, but fear held her still. She thought, what if it's poisoned? What if he beats me for touching it? Minutes passed in silence. The human did not force her. He only sat down across the room, watching quietly. Finally, the hunger grew too strong. With shaking hands, she reached out, tore a small piece of bread, and put it in her mouth. The taste was plain, but it felt like fire in her chest. Tears filled her eyes. She could not remember the last time someone fed her without a whip in their hand. The human saw her tears but said nothing. He looked away, giving her the space to eat in peace. He knew trust would not come in a day, maybe not even in a year, but he was willing to wait. After eating, the girl whispered, "Why me?" Her voice was so soft he almost did not hear. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. She continued, "No one wanted me. I am broken. I am worthless. Why you?" The human took a deep breath. His eyes grew distant for a moment. She thought he would not answer. Then he said, "Because I know what it feels like to be alone. To be unwanted." The word struck her like a blade. She did not understand everything, but she felt the weight behind them. His voice carried the same pain she carried. He was not saving her out of pity. He was saving her because, in her, he saw himself. Night fell outside. The girl sat quietly on the floor. The blanket he had given wrapped around her shoulders. The human sat near the window. Staring at the dark sky, both were silent, both lost in their thoughts. Yet the silence between them felt different than before. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of two broken souls beginning to understand each other. For the first time in years, the girl closed her eyes and felt the smallest spark of safety. She did not know if she could trust it, but she let herself rest, and the human, alone in his chair, whispered to himself, "Family doesn't always start with blood." The house was quiet, too quiet. The walls carried no laughter, no voices, only the sound of creaking wood and the soft hum of the old lamp. The girl sat near the corner, her knees pulled to her chest. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her thin body. Her eyes moved across the room, seeing everything and trusting nothing. The human moved slowly, giving her space. He placed simple things on the table: bread, water, an extra blanket, and then sat back in his chair. His silence was heavy, but it was not cruel. It was the silence of a man who had lived alone for too long. The girl had lived in many places. Cages, dark rooms, damp floors. None of them ever felt like home. This place was different. But she could not believe it yet. She expected chains to return. She expected shouting, orders, maybe a strike across her face, but the human did none of these things. He only watched her with quiet eyes. When night deepened, he stood and pointed toward a small room at the side. "You can sleep there," he said. His voice was steady, not demanding, just offering. The girl stared at the doorway, fear pulling at her chest. In the past, rooms had meant pain, secrets, darkness. She shook her head quickly. "No, I sleep here," she whispered, curling tighter in the corner. Her broken teeth showed when she spoke. Her words trembled. The human sighed, but he did not force her. He nodded and left the doorway open, letting her choose. He returned to his chair and sat quietly. The lamp flickered. Shadows moved across his face. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the ticking of an old clock filled the space. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, pretending to rest, but her body never relaxed. She was ready to run, ready to fight, even if she had no strength. The human looked at her and thought about the emptiness of his house. It had been years since he had shared it with anyone. Once there were voices here. Laughter, a family, but all that was gone now. The silence had become his companion, and he had grown used to it, yet tonight the silence felt different. It felt alive in the middle of the night. The girl woke up suddenly. A nightmare clawed through her mind. She saw chains, blood, laughter of her old masters. She cried out softly, covering her mouth with both hands to silence herself. She expected the human to wake up and punish her, but instead she heard his footsteps approach. He crouched near her, his face calm but concerned. "You're safe," he said in a low voice. "No one will hurt you here." His words carried weight. But she shook her head, not believing. She whispered back, "Safe doesn't exist, safe is a lie." The human wanted to argue, but he stopped. He knew the truth in her words. He had lived long enough to know the world was not safe, especially for the weak. Instead, he only said, "Maybe not safe everywhere, but safe here. With me." The girl looked into his eyes, searching for cruelty, searching for the hidden trick, but she found only tired honesty. That made her chest ache. She turned away, curling again into the blanket. "Why do you care?" she whispered. Her voice was so small, like the crack of a breaking shell. He did not answer right away. He stood and looked at the pictures on the shelf, faces from his past. "People who were gone," he whispered almost to himself, "because no one cared for me, and I know what that feels like." The girl heard, though he did not think she was listening. The words burned into her heart. She thought of her own pain, her own nights of hunger, her own broken body. She thought maybe, just maybe, this man understood more than she imagined. Morning came slowly. The human cooked something simple on the stove. The smell of warm food filled the small house. The girl opened her eyes, her stomach twisting with hunger. She sat up, unsure if she was allowed to move. He placed a bowl in front of her, not too close, giving her space again. "Eat," he said softly. She stared at it, her hands shaking. Then she remembered the bread from last night. He had not hurt her, he had not lied. Slowly, she picked up the spoon and took a bite. Warmth spread through her body. It was plain food, but to her it tasted like hope. The human watched her quietly. He did not smile, he did not push, he only let her eat in peace. That was his way, silence instead of force. Patience instead of chains. When she finished, she whispered again, "Why me?" Her voice carried the same question as last night. This time the human looked at her longer, his eyes tired but firm. "Because I didn't want to see you die in that place," he said. His words were heavy, filled with meaning she could not yet understand. The girl lowered her gaze. She still could not trust fully. But something inside her shifted. Maybe this house was not like the others. Maybe this silence was not a trap. Maybe it was the beginning of something she had never known. That day passed quietly. The girl stayed close to the wall, always watching, always listening. The human moved around the house, fixing small things, reading old books, sitting near the window. He did not chain her, he did not shout. He only let her exist, and in that silence, something fragile began to grow. The girl still carried fear, but in her heart a new question formed. What if this human truly meant what he said? What if she was not just a slave anymore? Days passed in silence. The girl stayed in her corner. Always watchful, always tense, she spoke little, ate only when hunger crushed her, and never asked questions. The human gave her space, never raising his voice, never lifting a hand against her. Still, the weight of her past held her down like invisible chains. One evening, the sky outside turned red with the dying sun. The human sat at the table repairing an old tool. His hands moved slow and careful. The girl sat on the floor across the room, her eyes following his every move. She expected at any moment the mask to break, the kindness to vanish, and the cruelty to begin. Her thoughts dragged her back to memories. She remembered her last master, who had once spoken gently too. He promised her food, promised her safety. Then one night, he chained her to the wall and beat her until she could not stand. Since that night, she learned never to trust soft words, never to trust quiet eyes. The human noticed her trembling. He set the tool down and asked, "Are you cold?" His voice was calm, but she flinched as if struck. She shook her head quickly, clutching the blanket tighter. Her broken teeth showed when she whispered, I can work, I can clean, I can." He raised his hand slightly, not in anger but to stop her words. "You don't have to," he said firmly. "You are not here to serve. You are here to live." Her heart pounded in her chest. The words confused her. They sounded like lies. They sounded impossible. She stared at him, searching his face for the trick, but found nothing except tired honesty. That only made her more afraid. That night, when she thought the human was asleep, she crept to the kitchen. She searched the shelves quickly, quietly. Her hands shook as she stuffed old bread into her blanket. In her mind, she told herself, "He will turn on me soon, I need food to run away." But before she could hide it, the human's voice came from the doorway. "What are you doing?" His tone was not angry, only curious. The girl froze, the bread slipping from her hands. She dropped to her knees, shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Don't hurt me. Please don't." The human stepped forward slowly, his face filled with sorrow. He picked up the bread and placed it back on the shelf. "No one will hurt you here," he said softly. "If you are hungry, just eat. You don't have to steal from me." Tears filled her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but her past screamed louder. She whispered, "Everyone says that, then they hurt me." The human sat down on the floor across from her, lowering himself so he wouldn't tower over her. His voice was quiet, steady. "I am not them." Her body shook harder. "Why should I trust you?" she cried. Her voice broke, the sound raw and painful. "Why did you buy me? Why didn't you leave me there to die?" The human's jaw tightened. His eyes dropped to the floor for a moment. He didn't answer. Then he said, "Because I know what it feels like to be unwanted. I couldn't leave you there." The girl stared at him. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She wanted to scream, to curse him, to push him away. But the words refused to come. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know how to believe you." The human nodded slowly. "Then don't believe me. Not yet. Just watch me. Let time decide." Silence filled the room. But it was not the silence of fear anymore. It was heavy, fragile, like glass that could shatter with one wrong move. Later that night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her body still tense, but her mind circling the words he had spoken. "I am not them." The sentence repeated in her head until she fell into restless sleep. The next morning, the human found her sitting near the window, staring at the light breaking through the clouds. She held the blanket around her shoulders. Her face looked softer, less guarded when he placed food on the table. She did not hesitate as much. She reached out, her hand trembling but steady enough to take a piece of bread without waiting for permission. He watched quietly, not smiling, not pushing. His silence was his answer. His patience was his proof. After eating, the girl whispered again, almost like a child, "Why did you choose me?" Her eyes searched his face, still filled with doubt but also a fragile hope. The human looked at her for a long moment, his voice steady when he replied, "Because I saw you, not your scars, not your chains, I saw you." Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever said that to her before. She looked away quickly, hiding the tears that burned her eyes. The bond between them was not strong yet. It was fragile, like a candle in the wind, but it was there for the first time. The girl did not curl into the farthest corner that night. Instead, she stayed closer to the wall near his chair, still distant but nearer than before, and the human, staring out at the night sky, allowed himself the smallest whisper, "One day, you'll see I mean it." The days slowly began to change. The girl still carried fear in her heart, but she no longer hid food in her blanket. She no longer shook every time the human entered the room. Her eyes still carried doubt, but now they also carried questions. She watched how he lived. He worked in the mornings, fixing tools, repairing small machines for the neighbors. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice was steady, calm, never harsh. At night, he read old books under the lamp. Sometimes his lips moved as if he whispered names that only he remembered. The girl noticed that his house, though quiet, carried the ghost of something lost. The pictures on the shelf showed smiling faces. Children, a woman with kind eyes she dared not ask, but she knew he had once belonged to a family. And now he lived with silence. One evening, as the rain fell softly outside, the human cooked soup. The smell filled the small house. The girl sat near the table, clutching her blanket. He placed a bowl in front of her and one for himself. For the first time, she spoke without being asked. "Why do you always make two bowls, even before me?" The human looked at her, his tired eyes softening.
"Habit," he answered simply.
Then after a pause, he added, "I used to cook for others. I suppose I never stopped." The girl stirred the soup slowly. Her lips trembled. She wanted to ask about the faces in the pictures, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "Do you miss them?" The human lowered his head. His voice grew heavy. "Every day," he said. "But missing them doesn't bring them back." The girl felt a strange ache in her chest. She had lost too, though no one spoke of it. She remembered her parents, long gone, sold or killed. She remembered the nights she prayed for someone to come, but no one did. For the first time, she felt a thread between her pain and his. After dinner, they sat in silence, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of two broken souls sitting near each other, not knowing how to speak, but knowing they were not alone. The next day, the human gave her a small task. He placed a pot of soil on the table and handed her a seed. "Plant this," he said. She frowned, confused. "Why?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because life should grow here. Even if it's small." She pressed the seed into the soil, her fingers shaking. It felt strange to do something that wasn't work, that wasn't survival. It felt like hope buried in the dirt as days passed. She checked the pot every morning. One morning, a tiny green sprout appeared. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, a real smile touched her lips. She turned to the human and whispered, "It's alive." He nodded, his eyes warming. "Yes, and so are you." Her smile faded into confusion. His words felt heavy, strange. She looked down quickly, hiding the heat in her face. Still, something inside her stirred later. When neighbors came to the house, they laughed at the human. "You bought a worthless slave," one sneered. "She will eat your food and give you nothing." Another shook his head. "Only a fool keeps trash in his home." The girl lowered her eyes, shame burning her skin, but the human stood firm. His voice calm but sharp. "She is not trash, she is mine, and she belongs here." The neighbors laughed louder, but something in his tone silenced a few of them. The girl's chest tightened. She had been called many names, slave, broken, worthless, but no one had ever said she belongs here. That night, she sat near the window, the lamp casting light across her face. She whispered, not sure if she wanted him to hear, "Why do you say such things? Why defend me?" The human looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because I don't see a slave, I see someone who deserves more." Her lips trembled. Her voice cracked when she asked, "Then, what am I to you?" The human hesitated, his jaw tightened. His eyes drifted toward the pictures on the shelf. Then he said slowly, "I don't know yet, but not a slave." "Never that?" The girl turned away quickly, her cheeks wet. She pressed the blanket to her face. Hiding the tears, she whispered into the fabric, "Am I family?" The human heard, but he did not answer right away. His silence stretched, heavy and fragile. Finally, he said softly, "Maybe not yet, but someday. If you choose it." Her heart pounded. The word family felt too big, too impossible. But the way he said it made her want to believe that night. When the lamp flickered low, she did not sleep in the far corner. She moved closer, sitting just a few feet away from his chair, still keeping distance but no longer hiding. The human noticed but said nothing. He only closed his eyes, letting the silence wrap around them both. And for the first time, the girl whispered to herself, "Maybe I am not worthless." The words were soft, trembling, but real. The small house had begun to feel less like a cage and more like a place to breathe. The girl still carried her scars, but the silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like rest. She watered the small plant every morning, watched the sprout grow taller, and sometimes caught herself smiling without realizing it. But peace never lasts long. Not in a world that feeds on cruelty. One evening, the sound of heavy boots echoed outside the house. The human lifted his head, his expression tightening. The girl froze, her body trembling. She recognized those footsteps. She had heard them before. They belonged to hunters, men who dragged the weak back to their masters. The door banged open and 2 alien enforcers stepped inside. Their armor was scratched, their faces cruel. Behind them stood the fat auctioneer who had once sold her for $2. His greedy eyes glared at the human. "You bought what wasn't yours to keep," he spat. "She belongs back in the pens." The girl's knees weakened. She dropped to the floor, her heart racing. She wanted to scream, to hide, to run, but her body refused to move. Memories of chains and whips crashed over her like waves. The human stood slowly, placing himself between the men and the girl. His voice was calm, but his words were sharp. "She belongs to no one now," the auctioneer laughed, the sound bitter and mocking. "She's property, broken property. You think kindness makes her yours. Hand her over before this gets ugly." The girl's breath caught. She stared at the human's back, wondering what he would do. Would he give her up, just like everyone else had done? Would he decide she wasn't worth the fight? But the human did not move aside. His hands clenched into fists. His voice grew colder. "I paid you, she's mine, but more than that. She is my family." The word struck the room like thunder. The girl gasped softly, her chest tightened. Her eyes filled with tears. Family. He had spoken it in front of everyone. The enforcers stepped forward, their weapons glinting. The human's body tensed. He was outnumbered, weaker, yet he did not step back. He whispered without turning, "Stay behind me." The girl's hands gripped the blanket tight. She wanted to shout, to tell him to let her go. She did not want him to be hurt because of her. But her voice failed. Her fear locked her in silence. The first enforcer swung his weapon. The human dodged clumsily, grabbing a broken chair to block the blow. Wood splintered across the floor. The second enforcer lunged forward, but the human kicked hard, sending the alien stumbling back. The auctioneer shouted, "Foolish human! You'll die for trash!" The human's voice roared louder than the chaos. "She is not trash." His words shook the small house, his fist struck again, his body moving with desperate strength. The girl crawled backward, tears streaming down her bruised face. She hated herself for being weak, for watching while he fought for her. Every strike he took felt like a wound in her own chest. She whispered again and again, "Why? Why are you doing this?" Blood ran from the human's lip. His coat ripped as a blade cut across his shoulder. Still, he stood firm, blocking every path to her. He glanced back for a moment, his eyes burning with something fierce. "Because you are mine," he said. "Because family protects each other." Her heart cracked wide open. The word family echoed in her soul. She had never known what it meant, never believed she would hear it. Yet here he was, bleeding, fighting, risking everything just to keep her. With a sudden cry, she grabbed the fallen piece of wood near her. Her small body shook, but her grip tightened. When one of the enforcers charged again, she struck wildly. The blow barely hurt him, but it distracted him long enough for the human to slam his fist into the alien's jaw. The enforcer stumbled. The human finished him with a heavy kick. The second one growled, stepping back. The auctioneer's face turned pale. He had not expected resistance. Not like this. Breathing hard, the human stood tall. His blood dripped onto the floor, his voice cold as stone. "If you come for her again, you won't leave this place alive." The enforcers hesitated. The girl, still clutching the broken wood, glared through her tears, her body weak but her eyes alive with fire. The auctioneer spat on the floor, his greed twisting into hate. "She will ruin you, human. She's worthless. You'll regret this." Then he turned and stormed out. His enforcers following, silence fell heavy. The human dropped the broken chair and leaned against the wall, His breathing ragged, the girl rushed to him, her small hands trembling as she touched his arm. "You're hurt," she whispered. Her tears dripped onto his torn sleeve. He shook his head, forcing a weak smile. "I've been hurt before." His eyes softened. "But you're here, and that's what matters." Her chest ached with something she had never felt. Not fear, not shame, but something warm. "Fragile," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why risk your life for me?" The human looked at her with quiet strength. "Because family is worth fighting for," the girl sobbed, pressing her face into his chest. Her broken teeth cut her lips, but she didn't care. She clung to him as if he were the last solid thing in her shattered world. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe she truly belonged. The night after the fight was long. The small house smelled of blood and broken wood. The human sat in his chair, his arm wrapped in cloth. His breathing heavy but steady. The girl sat close beside him, her eyes swollen from crying. She had never felt so torn, fear and hope battling inside her chest. She looked at him again and again. He had stood against them all, bled for her, refused to give her away. No one had ever done that. No one had ever called her family. The plant on the table stood tall now, its green leaves shining in the lamplight. She touched it gently, her fingers trembling. "It lived," she whispered, even when no one thought it would. Her voice shook, because she was not talking about the plant. She was talking about herself. The human lifted his tired eyes. His voice was soft, almost a whisper. "So did you." Her heart clenched. She wanted to deny it, wanted to hide. But deep inside she knew it was true. She was alive because of him. The next days were filled with silence, but it was no longer empty. The girl cleaned the floor without being asked. Not because she feared punishment, but because she wanted the place to look better for him. She cooked clumsy meals with shaky hands, spilling more than she served. But he ate every bite without complaint. Each night she moved closer, first sitting by the wall, then by the table, and finally by the chair beside him. The distance between them shrank, not by chains but by choice. One evening, she stared at the pictures on the shelf. Her voice trembled. "They were your family?" The human nodded slowly. "Yes, long ago." His eyes clouded with grief. "I lost them." She lowered her head, her voice cracked. "And now me. I am nothing like them. I am broken, ugly, worthless." His hand came down gently on her shoulder, stopping her words. "Don't say that." His voice was firm. "You are not worthless. You are not broken. You are alive. You are mine." Her lips shook. Her eyes filled with tears. "But I don't understand. How can I be family if I'm not blood?" The human leaned back, his gaze steady. "Family isn't always blood. Family is choice. Family is who stands beside you when the world turns against you." The words cut deep into her. For so long she believed family was gone, stolen from her. Now, here was a man telling her she could be family again, even with her broken teeth, her scars, her past. That night, she dreamed of chains, but this time when she woke, she did not cry alone. She found herself clutching the blanket he had given her, and for the first time she felt safe. Days later, whispers spread in the city. The human who bought the worthless slave, the one who fought the enforcers. People called him a fool, some called him brave. But the girl knew the truth. He was neither fool nor hero. He was simply someone who chose her when no one else did. One afternoon, as they sat together, she gathered the courage to speak. Her voice soft but steady. "You could have left me there. You could have walked away. Why didn't you?" He looked at her, his eyes heavy with the weight of many years. "Because I was tired of being alone. And when I saw you, I knew you were alone too." "Maybe we could stop being alone together." Her chest ached. A sob slipped from her lips. She covered her face, shaking. "I don't know how to be family." He gently took her hands away from her face, his rough palms warm against her skin. "Then we'll learn together." Her tears flowed freely. She pressed her forehead against his chest, her broken teeth scraped her lip. But she didn't care, she whispered through the sobs. "Then I choose it. I choose you. I choose family." The human's arms wrapped around her. Holding her close, his voice broke softly. "And I choose you." From that day, the girl no longer sat in the corner. She walked with him outside, watered the plant with him, cooked meals beside him. Her laughter, broken and soft, began to echo in the small house, and the silence that once haunted the walls was finally gone. The neighbors still whispered, still mocked. "The human lives with trash," they sneered, but neither of them listened. because they had found something greater than the world's cruel voices. On one quiet evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the girl looked at the plant, now strong and full. She touched its leaves and whispered, "It lived." And so did I. Then she turned to the human, her eyes glowing with something new. "And we lived together." He smiled faintly, tired but real. For the first time in years, he did not feel alone in the girl once beaten, once sold for $2, once called worthless. Finally knew the truth, she was family. Not by blood, not by worth, but by choice.